Look, I'm killing commies. Are you proud now, Pops?
Uwe Boll is a genius. The German film director made a name for himself in the mid-2000s by getting his hands on a bunch of video game licenses and turning them into movies. The adaptations were universally disliked and unprofitable, but because they were funded using a loophole in the German tax laws, he could just keep making them.
Because you know, there are all that rumors out that my movies are financed with Nazi gold, and what should I say? It's true.
The loophole was closed in 2006, so the hustle didn't last for too long, but before that Boll had managed to build something of a reputation for himself, and I got to respect that on some level. What I want to focus on is one of his completely original movies from 2008, Tunnel Rats, and more specifically the video game based on it. The game adaptation wasn't Boll's idea, but instead the developer Replay Studios specifically approached him about making a Tunnel Rats game. I assume Boll must have been tempted by the idea of having a game based on his movie instead of the other way around, because an agreement was reached. The game came out almost a full year after the movie, and before that Replay Studios was only known for the middlingly reviewed Destruction Derby game Crash Day. Curiously, not even a month after the release of the Tunnel Rats game, Replay also released the World War II stealth game Velvet Assassin. Calling Velvet Assassin a good game would be a stretch, but coming out so soon after Tunnel Rats, it's an exceptionally big step up. I'm not saying Replay used Uwe's Tunnel Rats money to fund Velvet Assassin, but if they did, I would admire the way they hustled the hustler. Either way, it didn't work out for Replay in the long run, as Velvet Assassin ended up being their last game. But enough of that. Tunnel Rats is a first-person shooter set in the Vietnam War. You play as Brooks the Tunnel Rat, a US soldier specialized in clearing the Viet Cong's underground tunnel systems. The story begins as Brooks' squad's helicopter is shot down above hostile territory and he finds himself alone in what appears to be an abandoned enemy encampment. At that point, his only goal becomes finding his way back to safety while the horrors of war test his humanity.
What am I turning into?
Getting Tunnel Rats to function at all requires installing a PhysX legacy driver and applying DXVK to prevent crashing in the opening cinematic. With the fixes in place, the game now throws some errors on startup, but after ignoring those it works as well as it can. Sometimes there may be issues where the frame rate gets capped oddly specifically to either 16 or 32 frames per second, but at least on some systems a reboot might be enough to solve that. The game was barely functional to begin with, so prepare for some issues if you do decide to give it a try. Even if the frame rate is stable, that doesn't make the game pretty. For the most part, the visuals hover somewhere between bland and blatantly unfinished. The animations are stiff, the enemies bleed sawdust, and the skyboxes are empty. The quality in general is low but consistent, so it's easy to get used to the look, at least outside of higher areas where the skybox issue becomes obvious. On the upside, the tunnels can look pretty good with the way the flashlight illuminates them. They always look the same, but still better than anything else in the game. Something that really stands out about the visuals is just how barren the Vietnam jungle looks. The pre-release trailer shows lots of trees, but in the Steam release the exteriors look more like abstract hedge mazes. Apparently the game originally used a third-party tool SpeedTree to generate trees and vegetation, but at some point the license expired and Replay opted to save some cash by disabling it and removing all the trees from the game. You can find some old footage with vegetation on YouTube, so maybe out there somewhere still exist physical copies printed before the change. That version even has red blood, very fancy. The audio holds up considerably better than the graphics. The music is from the movie and stands out as being of higher quality than anything else in the game.
Time to set the world on fire.
Some of the combat music does repeat a lot, but in a game like this I'm honestly glad there even is something that can be called a soundtrack.
Keep it steady. Fucking accidents, Pops.
Not much can be said about the sound effects other than that they're unremarkable. They do their job, the different guns have their own sounds, and the ambience in the jungle is different from the tunnels. But the most notable part of the audio are the voiceovers. The protagonist loves the sound of his own voice, and the delivery in combination with the writing is delightfully bad.
Man, this is some harsh shit out here. I can't take much more. I need some gentle shit. Some female company. And I don't mean some hard-faced little Saigon whore. I need some quality time with Julianne, man.
We'll get more into the writing later. Even in a good bad game, I think the soundscape needs to reach a bare minimum to avoid being bland, and Tunnel Rats passes that test with flying colors. The previously mentioned lack of vegetation isn't just a graphical issue, so let's talk about the gameplay. Tunnel Rats has murder grass stealth, but the grass is invisible. You can still hide in it if you happen to find some, making the AI look very dumb. Which is a little embarrassing for Ball, who in an interview said that AI was especially important to him because shitty AI ruins every game. The combat AI isn't smart either, and the enemies are happy to all walk into their deaths, but I guess they at least sort of try to fight back. The standard weapons all feel the same, and the iron sights only seem to make them less accurate. There's no real benefit in having an automatic rifle either, since the muzzle flashes make aiming impossible and body shots are miserably weak compared to headshots. The special weapons like the grenade launcher and the sniper rifle stand out from the rest, with the flamethrower being by far the strongest weapon in the game. The tiniest hit is enough to kill, and since the areas are small, the limited range is not an issue. It's kinda ridiculous how overpowered it feels. To the game's credit, headshots cause some pretty satisfying head explosions, and you get a lot of them. Even better are the grenades, which also explode the arms and cause a hilariously overlapped squishy sound effect. Sadly, grenades often bug out and become completely unthrowable, so they're unusable most of the time. Between combat encounters you collect dog tags from your fellow soldiers and trophies from dead enemies. Collecting about a pound of ears from headless corpses earns you a new health bar segment, which is a very useful thing to have if you're playing on hard difficulty. Though I wouldn't recommend playing on hard anyway, as most enemies don't drop ammo and it can become a real issue, at which point all you're left with is the pathetic knife.
Christ, I'm glad Julianne can't see me like this.
For some reason, the only difficulty options are easy and hard, with no sensibly balanced middle ground in between. While the game is very linear, there are some optional objectives like blowing up radio towers and looking for documents, though there doesn't seem to be any point in doing them other than mild personal satisfaction. At the end of each level there is a stat screen that acknowledges you did the things, but it doesn't let you know if there was something you missed or award you in any way. Digging through the game files reveals a bunch of images of medals that could have maybe been meant for ratings, but they are nowhere to be seen in the game. What gives Tunnel Rats its identity are of course the tunnels. Sometimes there's a small room between the tunnels, and they occasionally split into side tunnels that you can get mildly lost in, but ultimately they are the most narrow and linear corridors I've seen in any game. You know you have a good setting for a shooter when the levels don't have enough room for a sidestep. And it's not like the tunnels are a small part of the game either. About half of its length is spent crouching in them. The good thing is that it's an appropriately short game, clocking in at under 3 hours. Combat inside the tunnels is obviously dumb, but it's not the enemies that are the real threat, not even close. Above and below ground, the Viet Cong territories are full of lethal traps ranging from grenades on tripwires and trapdoor covered spike pits, to snakes on sticks and whatever this is. Some serious dedication must go into maintaining this water trap that floods a tunnel in a vain effort to drown the intruder. It is a little gruesome knowing that even the most insane traps have a basis in reality, but in the context of the game they still make me laugh every time. Maybe I'm just a bad person. In the later levels some traps become deviously indistinguishable, but most of them are always easy to spot and avoid. Their goal isn't to outsmart you, but to overwhelm you. Missing a single one is enough to get you killed, and they are everywhere. I'm not sure if it's actual good design or a coincidence that you must divide your attention between looking for spike traps in the ground and snakes on the ceiling. All in all, the immense amount of traps makes me wonder how many accidents the Viet Cong have daily. Let's talk about the story and writing. The main story is simple. After the helicopter crash in the opening cutscene, it's all about escaping the jungle. This could have easily been a game where nothing of note happens between the opening and ending cutscenes, but there are at least a couple of little standout moments like a failed rescue attempt and a boss encounter with a cannibalistic soldier. They're not much, but small positive surprises that stop the game from getting boring. It seems a bigger story element may have been planned, as several levels have ending cutscenes that show a Viet Cong officer with bandages on his face visiting areas Brooks has just gone through. The way he's set up makes him seem like some sort of main villain, though in the final fight he is no different from any of the other enemies and is among the first to die. The fight itself is the perfectly anticlimactic ending to the game. You arrive at some tiny ruins just in time to see a friendly chopper take off and leave you behind, and right after that the bandage officer leads a group of Viet Cong to the ruins for a horde fight. The enemies come from all directions and there is no proper directional audio, so the fight can be something of a challenge, but fortunately there's a flamethrower in the ruins that simplifies things. After the Viet Cong are dead, the Americans bomb the ruins to smithereens, only killing one of their own, and the credits roll unceremoniously. As for the movie the game is based on, the only direct connection I noticed was one of the side characters being briefly mentioned.
The CO Halliburton is a real hard ass.
In all fairness, the movie's plot is about some US soldiers getting lost in a tunnel while their camp gets overrun, so there wasn't much to work with in that regard. And that's fine, because Tunnel Rats is not so much about the story as it is about the general horrors of war and the ways they can affect a soldier psychologically.
This ain't no VC camp, it's just a village! All those bodies! What the fuck am I doing here? I should be back home in California. Why did I listen to my old man and not Julianne? Why am I on the other side of the world fighting someone else's civil war? We can't win this. It's fucking insanity. I don't even know who the good guys are anymore. It's all foobar. Fuck it all, man.
Throughout the game, Brooks has a lot of inner monologue that fleshes out his character by talking about his relationships and childhood. These monologues with the random battle cries do a great job at making the character come across as an unlikable, racist psychopath.
She must have been real impressed with those hippies, so let them brainwash her like that. She's screwing them. I know she is. Screwing around, taking 2 or 3 on at a time. Just like the whores in Saigon. Cheap little hippie slut. Fuck her.
Replay Studios probably wanted to show some real character growth as Brooks witnesses more and more horrors and kills more people, but that's not at all what comes across. There is no long-term character development, and Brooks can go from a scared rookie to a bloodthirsty killer and back in a matter of seconds. But you know what? I think that's the best part of the game. Brooks is an all-around terrible character who never stops talking, and that makes him a fascinating piece of dark comedy. He is the personification of the slow-motion train wreck that you can't stop looking at.
Thank God I'm American, man. Thank God I'm free. I could have been North Vietnamese, ending up fighting for the commie. Why the hell do they want to fight for that? To be slaves of communism? Brainwashed, I guess. Totally brainwashed.
I've gone out of my way many times to try and find good bad video games that are fun the same way some B-movies are, and Tunnel Rats has just the right amount of effort and talent put into it to hit that sweet spot. It could have easily been twice as long without adding anything worthwhile, but it knew how to pace itself and ended before getting too repetitive. The cheap traps, insane writing, and the generally low quality of everything keep it entertaining for just long enough to make it a true gem. Obviously I would never recommend it to anyone looking for anything remotely decent, but connoisseurs of awful games should be able to appreciate it. In the video description I'll have a link to an abridged video of my recent playthrough, edited by DownGraphics, in case you'd like to get the Tunnel Rats experience by watching it rather than playing it yourself. But if you do want to pick it up, it's €19 on Steam, which is the only storefront that sells it, and the last time it was on sale was over 10 years ago. When I started making scripted videos, I made the decision to focus on positive things, but Tunnel Rats was just too interesting not to share. It's something that has fascinated me by its sheer existence ever since it was released, and as a weirdo speedrunner I put an unhealthy amount of hours into humping walls and checking every corner in it. I'll try to stick to better games in the future, but every now and then, a bad game can bring you a surprising amount of joy, and sometimes that's exactly what you need. Maybe one day I'll look into some other unlikely classics.
War is hell.